Hello, internet friends.
Hi.
Welcome to Podcast with a K, the first episode. Real talk with lowercase r. This came before episode 0, and, for time reasons, like chronological things. But, anyways, yeah, this is the show where we talk about real things with a capital R and real things with a lowercase r. I am your host, Kristian Mischke, here with Steven Laczko, and we're going to be talking about education some more. Last week we kind of talked about Steven's story and answered some questions. This week we're going to talk a little bit about my story and also just explore some other questions. Then we're going to get into the other topics that we normally do. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Heck yeah. Yeah, so last time we got into my story and about the role of education and the role of college and what it does and some of its good and bad parts.
Mm-hmm.
This time we're going to get a little bit more into that, a little bit more into, maybe the grading side of things and, alternatives. And we're just going to deepen the conversation a little bit. But first, I'm going to ask Kristian some questions, want to get to know his history with his educational experience. So, before you got into college, and I don't even know a lot of this, what did you do in high school? What did you do in before that, elementary school? Were they different?
Sure. Yeah. So let's see. I grew up homeschooled. I was homeschooled all 12 years of education, and that was different in different times. So in elementary school, it was pretty much just our mom doing stuff with us, and yeah, we would pretty much just learn stuff on our own and with our mom. Then in middle school is when I actually started going to a co-op, and that is with a bunch of other homeschoolers. And many people who aren't homeschooled ask me this question, like, "What the heck is a co-op?" And they're actually different depending on how they're organized. And in fact, ours was kind of changed over time. But the way that ours was run was a bunch of different homeschoolers were working together, and it was typically the moms. I think there was occasionally a dad or two that would teach the classes in the co-op, and it would be whatever they are specialized with. They would teach classes for. And in middle school, that was like it was more like a unit study kind of thing where we would study multiple topics, and then we'd have like a science and then like a gym or something. And there would typically be about like 4 periods, and then anything that wasn't covered under the co-op, we would do at home with our mom. So math, I would do at home. I think there was like a literature arts that I would do at home. And then in high school, the topics get more specialized, and you can start choosing things. And and that's the point where like the moms who are doing the teaching are typically teaching in things that they studied. Um, so yeah, in high school, I was doing the co-op. So it was typically 4 classes at the co-op, and then I don't know. It depends on how many I would do outside of that. It could have been between 2 and 4 classes outside of the co-op. And the way the
Mm-hmm.
co-op was structured is we met once a week on Fridays. It was just like we did 4 periods. We had our homework for the next week, figured that out on our own pretty much, and then brought it back. So that was kind of the logical structure of it, at least.
Mm-hmm. At home, what did you do to learn the other subjects your co-op didn't cover?
Sure. So our mom picked out different curriculum for different topics. So for math, we started with Saxon actually, but that didn't work out too well for me. I don't know why. It just didn't.
Mm.
It wasn't something that I was vibing with, I guess. And we switched to Matthew C, and that was way better for me. And so that wasn't really as hands-on. Like my mom could help me through the earlier subjects and units of that. But once we got to a certain point, it was like I couldn't go to her for questions about it. So it was just like I watched the videos, and the videos were typically enough to explain how the things that we're talking about worked, and then I would do the assignments, and she would just grade them based off of the grade books that came with it. So
Mm.
in that regard, it was just me doing the work, and then she graded it at the end of the day or end of the week. And
So
with
this was a book, by the way. This is a book with DVDs, I'm guessing.
Yes, so Matthew C was a
Okay.
workbook. It came with DVDs. There was a workbook and a text and a test book. So there were actually like
Mm.
tests, and with math specifically, I didn't actually do so they have it set up where you can do like four pages for each topic and then do the test, but I didn't. I did like one or two because math came pretty easily to me. In
Mhm.
fact, in 1 year of high school, I think it was sophomore or junior year, I did 2 years of math in 1 year. Be
Nice.
and I was just like whipping through the book. I think it was probably Algebra 2 and Geometry. Um,
Mhm.
just because they were easy, and I was like, get it done with, Which
Sure.
actually allowed me to take calculus in my junior year, and I regret that because I took it again at CCBC, a community college, my senior year, and it was a piece of cake. Now, I don't regret it because it was a piece of cake. Like, it prepared me for it. I didn't need to do any studying. It was just basically like, oh, I'll pay attention in class and refresh my brain, as opposed to like learning it. But if I had
Mhm.
taken it a year earlier, then that would have been better. Like, that's one thing that if I could go back and tell myself, hey, you should do this differently in school, it would be um, do community college classes, dual enrollment with your high school as a homeschooler, right? Do it earlier. Don't just do it, in
Mm.
your senior year because,
Okay. Okay. So you could have done calculus in college in your junior year
yeah,
in high school, but
hmm
instead you did it on your own, and then you had to just
do it again.
rehash it all.
Yep,
Yeah, absolutely. Dual enrolling is very powerful if you can.
definitely.
How much did you dual enroll?
That
Like
was
how many
the
classes?
only class that I dual enrolled, and
Really?
again, that's why I regret it. If I had known that before my senior year, I would have changed things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned choosing in high school, where in high school you start to get more specific with what you're studying.
hmm
What did you mean by that? What do you mean by choosing?
Sure. So there were extracurriculars in like at the co-op, and then kind of like a choice between do I want to do it at home or do want to do it at the co-op. So I mean, science classes I always wanted to do at the co-op because that was more engaging, more interesting with a teacher and doing it with other people.
Mm-hmm.
But like some of the classes, some of the extracurriculars would be like, well, this would have been in middle school, but I did a robotics thing in middle school,
Mm-hmm.
so it was focused around the NXT system, um,
Yeah.
and I did that at the co-op for a year or two, and I can't remember the timeline. I should actually look this up. But I was doing F2L as kind of an
Yeah.
extracurricular outside of the co-op with a group of people. So I was learning those in both places. And
And do
then,
you have to?
yep. Uh,
Sorry, the first
oh,
Lego League
sorry,
FLL.
FLLO. Yes, there are two L's there.
Yeah.
um, so first Lego League, which is the competition where you build the Lego robots and stuff. Um, and
That's
then
very
like
fun.
other extracurriculars were I did karate for a couple years.
Mm-hmm.
I think I did it for 3 years. Got all the way up to, well, it was karate and then it switched to taekwondo because we switched the
Mm,
instructors. So I think I got up to a brown belt, which was fun.
that's pretty good. Wow.
Yeah.
So you had choice in the extracurriculars
hmm
you could choose. That was extracurriculars in middle school you were talking about.
Yeah. So.
So in high school,
mhm.
what kind of choices did you have there?
So the in high school again the like there were extracurriculars like the karate was in high school.
Mm,
Um, the robotics was in middle school. Um,
okay.
there were choices in like if I wanted to do like literature at home or if I wanted to do it at co-op. So in the co-op, I think I did a wasn't what's the opposite of creative writing? Non-creative writing.
Uncreative writing.
I guess just like a writing course,
Yeah.
like papers and stuff. Essay writing. I chose to do that at the co-op, and that kind of like supplemented the work that I was doing in literature arts. So there's a certain curriculum. I think it's called like Living Languages with Literature Arts or something.
Mm, mm,
Um, that I was doing at home, and that kind of had a history element to it and then a writing element to it. So when I was taking the class in the
uh,
co-op, I was doing the writing stuff mostly for the class and then just not doing the writing stuff for this curriculum. So it was kind of like a choose your own, like how do you want to do it, where do you want to do that kind of work. And with homeschooling, I guess a question that non-homeschoolers might ask, or people who are thinking about it for their kids, it's like, what are the requirements? Like, do you just do
Mhm.
whatever? And it really depends on your umbrella, is what it's called. So, our homeschool umbrella, I think I graduated technically through Churchville, um, the Churchville umbrella. So, at the end of the year, there's like a review and make sure that your work is up to standards and whatnot. But it's different per umbrella. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, just
And of note is that you'll find different laws in different states.
yeah.
In Maryland, we didn't have an umbrella actually.
Oh yeah.
Well, we did for some time, but it ended up being that where I graduated from was what did we call it? We named it. We
Hmm.
just gave it a name. Is that what you did too?
No, so technically, I have a transcript that says Churchville Homeschool Umbrella.
Oh, okay, okay,
But my when I graduated, we like I think we printed out like a fake diploma that has like Mischke Stafford residence or whatever on it.
okay.
So
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we did. My family also had to do an umbrella to get those regular reviews because that's what's required by state is
Hmm.
those reviews.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So in high school, so I wanted to get to how when did you start thinking about college
Mm,
and how did you what mental image or what mental concept did you have of college in high
sure.
school or before even.
Right. Wow. So college was this, I don't know. It's like it was this kind of big thing in the sky. Like I knew it was there. I knew it was coming. I knew it came after high school. And I always assumed that it was going to be like really difficult. Like this is the thing, like this is the big leagues. This is what comes after high school. And high school is harder than middle school, so it's just going to be even harder. Like, logically following that. And I guess I had put that together from, just the things that people have heard, or it's like, oh, it's adults doing things. So, of course it's going to be more difficult.
Hmm.
Um, but I guess it had always been in my mind from probably the beginning of high school, and my dad talked to me about it quite a bit and kept pushing me to like look at different programs and um, yeah, especially during those last 2 years of high school, he was kind of on my tail, being like, "Hey, are you thinking about these things? What are you thinking about? Are you doing research?" And
Hmm.
definitely those last 2 years, I was doing my own research and thinking about what I wanted to do. Um,
Hmm.
and yeah, so I guess I mean that was kind of my high school view of it. It's this big scary thing. It's going to be difficult, and I have to do it.
Hmm. Right. Yeah. 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 And you actually, I'm pleased to hear that you got the opportunity to, or at least had that push to go and do your own research,
Hmm.
find out what you needed to do, or what you wanted to do. Before we get into your what actually happened in college, how did that? What was that process like of finding what you wanted to actually go into in college?
Sure. So, um, since a young age, I'd always known that I liked video games, and I wanted to make video games. And I started programming in a language called Scratch, which is a drag and drop language. When I think I was like 10, and then I got a programming book after I have like in this desk here, I have pages and pages of games, like game ideas I wanted to make. And I would just like mess around on Scratch making stuff, and then I got a book. You can probably see it in there somewhere. You probably can't read it. Um, Java, make like learning Java in 24 hours or 24 days. And that's where I started programming. And I programmed all throughout middle school and high school and learned just by making random stuff. And I didn't actually make anything that like went anywhere, but it was just for the learning experience.
Hmm.
Um, and so I had always known that I wanted to do that. There was a period in high school where I became really interested in VFX and that kind of like CGI animation, that kind of stuff. And that was kind of when I started putting those videos on my YouTube channel, where me and my family and friends would make those shorts
Mm-hmm.
and feature films or whatever, short films.
For
Um,
those who don't know, yeah, Christian put quite a few little short films on his channel, like the Shut saga, Shut
yes,
series, critically acclaimed little short cinematographic art pieces.
yep.
They're worth checking out for sure. The great display of his, the skill that he got in his high school experience. It was great.
Yeah. So, I
Love that
mean,
stuff.
for I think there was a year in high school where I was like, I can't program. I'm done. Like
Uh,
school was burning me out, and I was like, I can't focus on programming. It burns me out too. And I just wanted to do something creative, and CGI, animation, VFX were creative, and I spent hours watching YouTube videos and learning how to do random things in Blender and After Effects.
mhm.
So there was a point in time where I was like, I don't know, do I want to do computer science? Do I want to do CGI animation? And I was looking at schools in both areas. Um, and I don't know what exactly made me change my. Oh, no, no, no. Okay. Yeah. So I think it was at the end of junior year. I was like, I have this skill. I can do both things. But I came up with an idea for an app, and I wanted to make a language learning app. I actually have a post about this on my blog that you can find at blog.kkcoder.net. Um, and it was a language learning app, and I was pretty passionate about it too. Um, and I had to do a bunch of research to figure out how I could get it to do the things that I was doing. And I finally stumbled across this thing called phonemes, and I was like, it's the unit that describes a chunk of language that's smaller than a word that is a sound, right? Um, and that was important for what I was trying to do. But doing that research made me realize that there's this whole field that I had never heard of in high school, and I was like, where the heck did this thing called linguistics come from?
Mm-hmm.
So that was something that kind of pushed me towards the programming and the language side of things, and away from the visual effects, CGI kind of things. And
Mm-hmm.
that's, I guess that was one of the pushing factors towards why I wanted to do computer science.
So you had these two kind of competing. They're not mutually exclusive, but
No,
two
they weren't.
competing ideas.
Hmm.
And then you just kind of stumbled upon something else you were interested in. It leaned towards this side.
Yeah.
You get into it.
Hmm.
That's great. And so what are you doing now?
So now I am finishing up my fourth year at UMBC. I my position. So I will be graduating with a bachelor's of science in computer science in the game development track, and with a minor in applied linguistics. So taking on those two aspects.
There you go.
I was when I was first getting into it back in 2017. I was like, what if I could do a dual major, right? Computer science and linguistics. Um,
Mhm.
Came to find out, bachelors of science and bachelors of arts do not are not compatible, so it would count as a double degree, which means you have to take like an extra 25 credits. And I was like, it's not worth it. I'll just go with the bachelor's and then the minor.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yeah. So okay, so you had this whole 2 year period where you decided what you were going into, and you had this huge monolith that was college. So you big scary thing.
Hmm.
There's a lot of unknowns there. And then you sign up and you're there. What is
Yeah,
that like?
it was really freaky the first few days.
Really?
Yeah, I
Why?
mean, the first day, I think, um, I went to the classroom and I thought that I thought that it was not the right classroom, so I didn't show up to one of my classes. Um,
Oh
so I was
no.
like, oh, I guess they're not having class today, but it was actually they were already in there, but I didn't go in the right room. Um,
Oh, oh,
but
oh.
yeah, no, it was kind of intimidating at first because I was like, I'm in a new social context. I don't know exactly how to operate in this context. It's not something I'm used to. A lot of these people are used to public schools and or private schools, not necessarily homeschooling. I didn't know what portion of the population I was. So it was just a lot to figure out, what is my role in this context? Like I'm here to learn, but there's a lot of other things to learn about because I hadn't been in a context where like, oh, you're on your own when it comes to, you know, getting food at the cafeteria and that kind of stuff. Like I bought some stuff, you know, at the grocery store before, or like at a Subway, but it's not quite the same when you're around so many people who are, I guess, in similar situation. But
It's like you're suddenly thrown into a situation where you're now an adult. Congratulations.
yes.
Good luck.
Hmm. And yeah, definitely. And there are definitely some like, I guess, administrative things where it's like you have to go to a building and meet with a person, and it's like, am I doing this the right way? Kind of a
Mm-hmm.
thing. Um, but
Just
academically,
unsure. Go ahead.
yeah, but academically, um, I was very surprised. Like it was a very good experience to start with. I was like, okay, this is what learning is like. You've got professors, they're teaching like a lot more people than I'm used to be taught in a room together, right? Like at our co-ops, I think the max class size was like 15 or something, and the minimum was like 5 or 6. So I was not used to seeing a class full of 100 people or 40
Hmm.
people or 20 people. Um, but I really liked my professors the first semester. Actually, I was just remembering. So my first semester when I was registering for classes that summer, um, I was on the wait list for my computer science class, and I was like, oh crap, I'm not going to be able to get a computer science class my first semester. So that was kind
Mm-hmm.
of stressing me out. And then it turns out like the first day of classes, I got into it, and I was like, oh my goodness.
Oh, wow.
So yeah,
Oh, goodness.
that was really nice.
That's scary.
It was scary because I was like, wait, I thought I could just take the classes I was gonna take,
Yeah,
but
right. But
no.
then, nope, nope.
Yeah,
They wish they made that clear, more clear for me too. I gotta say.
there is supply and demand.
Yeah, exactly. And when you're new, they don't give you any preference. Like they don't prefer you to take it at all. It's all people
Yeah,
further into their majors.
no, exactly. Yep.
So I want to ask a couple things
Hmm.
before we get into our main question here. We'll get into that soon,
Hmm.
but just a couple quick questions. What was well first like in the social realm when you first got in there and you're expecting all these people who are from public school and private school, and there's all sorts of kinds of people there who these a lot of social just this a social atmosphere you haven't yet experienced.
Hmm.
Did you find anybody else like you in a quickly? I assume you would find some other homeschoolers there, but maybe not.
I
What was
mean,
that like?
I found you.
Oh wait, okay. So we're only talking about UMBC here. I was imagining a community college.
Oh, community college only was in the last year of high school. So it was just that one
Okay,
class. And then I went to UMBC and
right.
that's my 4 years.
Okay, yeah.
So yeah.
Taking one class is different because you
Yes.
don't hang around all day on
I was just
campus.
there. It basically felt like my other high school classes. And I had taken a class online 1 year in high school for physics.
Hmm.
And that it kind of felt like that because it was like, oh, well, we're just going, instead of doing it online and being there in that virtual space for an hour and then disappearing, it was like, oh, we're going to a building with, I don't know, 20 people and then doing the class and then leaving. And it was like
That makes
it
sense.
was the Owings Mills campus, so it wasn't like a main campus of CCBC.
Got you. Right. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that go into it.
Yeah.
So UMBC was really your first college
Yes. Hmm.
experience. So who were the first homeschoolers you came across?
I
How'd you come across them?
I have to think. If I'm not mistaken, I think you were probably one of the first homeschoolers I met,
Wow.
and that would have been my second year at UMBC, I believe.
Whoa.
Yeah,
Okay. It took you a while.
it did. But you weren't the first person I met,
Hmm.
obviously. um, I made. I mean, you're the first friend that I still have. No, that's not true. Yeah. I mean that I still connect with regularly. I made some friends in some computer science classes,
Mm-hmm.
And we were friends for a couple of years, kind of off and on, talking about computer science stuff. But we were pretty much computer science friends. Um, and yeah, I don't think I really bumped in. I didn't bump into anybody that was homeschooled, at least that I remember. I might have, but nothing that I like connected with um, to our extent, I suppose.
Sorry. Very good. Interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah. So I want to get into these main questions here
Hmm.
before it gets too late here. Um, so we have some again some big questions this week, and this one is it's a little more specific than last week's one, which was very high level about education in general. This is, why is education all about grades?
Hmm.
This permeates every student's thought. Everyone stresses out over grades, or a lot of people do. It adds a lot of grief to our lives. So why?
This is
Why
this is the
grades?
question.
Yeah.
um,
Initial thoughts?
so I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is this is very much a continuation of the industrialization era, right? Like, we have to churn out employees, and they have to meet certain standards, much like factories, right? Have to meet certain standards. Their output has to be a level, right? They need to. I don't know all the examples, but um, they need to
Needs
meet.
to achieve a certain quality standard.
Yes, need to achieve a certain quality standard, or a certain output amount, to be a successful employee. And training for factories becomes training for other disciplines, and grades are a measurement that's stuck around, I suppose.
Hmm. Hmm.
Is it the most effective? I don't know.
That's a deep question, because before we really before we jump into is it the most
Right.
effective,
Well,
we have to talk about any alternatives.
sure, but also why? Like, that's a little bit of history about grades, right? But what do grades do? What do they give you, right? You
Hmm.
have, and typically how grades work, right? At least, yeah, typically how grades work are, you'll have, it'll be a breakdown in depending on each class, and those breakdowns can be very different. It can be participation, it can be exams, it can be homeworks, it can be presentations, and professors will choose those proportions, and they'll be like, okay, filling up this bar fills up this much of your grade. Um, and but if you look at a grade on like an individual assignment, for example, if you take an exam, right, you're going to get a grade for that individual assignment. And that's typically going to be how many did you get right versus how many total are there. Whereas if it's for something like a presentation, it might just be, there's a rubric, and then the professor's like, okay, well, it's more qualitative. It's like, I guess you probably fell on the 4 out of 5 points for this aspect, or the 1 to 2 points for this aspect. So it's not as hard, like, concrete as the exam situation. And then participation is just a check in the box. Hey, you were here. So there's these different ways that the professors can choose to fill that, assignment, of a grade. And I don't know. It makes you wonder a lot of things.
Yeah, I think you have to look at it from different standpoints. We have to come back to
Yeah.
the differing
Hmm.
perspectives and how it impacts all the parties involved. So, first party students. Let's just talk about what the students think and how it affects them first. So, for student, what is the function? What are the functions of a grade? What do you think?
Hmm. I mean, this, to a student, the functions of a grade are, to show that they know the things that they are, like, it's like a recall thing, right? They can produce something, that they know that they should be able to produce, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
they are consuming something from the class, and they're producing it back out, and that grade tells them how well or how much that they can produce back out to the accuracy of what's expected, basically.
Mm-hmm. So that's feedback.
Yes.
That's one function of grades,
Hmm.
feedback. Another function of grades is, or the not just a function but an impact of grades on the students, is that it determines well, to some extent, determines your life, a large portion of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And if your grades are too low, it's going to affect your life in potentially significant ways. And that totally depends on your degree and what you're going into,
Yeah.
all this stuff. Like grades, you could get a B. It's fine.
Yeah.
You could get a C. A lot of times, it's
Mm-hmm.
fine. C's get degrees, as they say. But there's still that pressure behind it, obviously. They don't have a gun to your head like the government with taxes, but they
Right.
have, to some extent, your future in their hands, or at least that's how they frame it.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So I think we have those two impacts. We have that they give you feedback and that they impact your life. That's
Yes.
how they judge you.
Yes.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
How effective are they in these roles, do you think? Well, for
Um,
feedback, how effective are they in feedback, you think?
it depends. I think on feedback, it depends on how the professor does it, but I think that is generally good, right? You are getting uh, on feedback. I think it is generally good if it's set up the way that I'm assuming that's set up, right? Um,
Hmm. Like what?
so in the case of assignments, right? You do a writing assignment. You get a grade back on your writing assignment. You should know basically how well you've done on that assignment, like your quality of writing. Does it meet the requirements of what the professor asked for? Um, if you're doing like then you have feedback of how well you've done those things or how much you've recalled from the class. If you're talking about an exam, this it will also be effective in that it will show you how much you know when you have no access to materials. Um, I
Right.
have contentions with that, of course, because I believe that you should probably have the resources that you would have on the job that the class is teaching you for.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
is it are grades effective for participation? Are they effective for more qualitative things? That really depends on, I guess, the reason for the grade or who's giving it.
Hmm. So in terms of feedback, they can be okay, and
Yeah.
it very much depends on the professor as well, because they could give you a C, and you think you did actually very well on that paper,
Yeah.
and it's like, well, crap, if they don't give you like a write up detailing the things that you did wrong in the paper, then it's useless. In that
Mm-hmm.
case, the grades themselves are useless.
Sure.
I think on a lot of assignments, on a lot of types of work, you need written feedback, and grades aren't really sufficient. They just give you a, hey, the professor thinks you did wrong.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's
Yeah.
for more qualitative things, though,
Sure.
for
And
sure.
I think so feedback is more helpful when you get feedback, right? Um,
Yeah.
and detailed feedback. So it almost makes me think of machine learning, where it's like you go through a neural network and you get an output, and then you want to correct that output, so you go back and you feed and correct the network so that it produces something that's more to what you're expecting. You're updating the network to give you a better expected result. So if you can provide more detailed feedback to all the aspects that produce that end result, then that's going to be more useful to a student, right? Because then they're like, oh, I was wrong on this problem because of this reason.
Hmm.
Or I was
Hmm.
wrong in this sentence or this paragraph because of this reason. It didn't logically follow, or it's a fallacy, or
Hmm.
it just wasn't written to the quality that was expected. Um,
Hmm.
and if those are identified and it's not just a letter, then that's helpful because it is
Yeah.
feedback.
And to explain for those who don't know about neural networks, uh, the more detailed the feedback is, the better you can learn from it. The more they get into the nitty gritty of what you did wrong, the better you're going to learn.
Hmm.
And that's kind of, it seems obvious, but not all professors give great feedback.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, as long as professors neglect that portion of their job, which I believe students are entitled to some feedback on their work, they pay a lot for it, then we're going to have grades aren't serving one of their major functions.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, what about grades dictating dictating your life, dictating your potential future?
Right. So yes. So there is an importance to grades, right? If you get a grade on a class that has another class that has it as a prerequisite, like you're taking Calc 2 after Calc 1, and you get an A in Calc 1, then you should be fine for Calc 2, right? Like you've done all the stuff that it's prepared you, right? If you get a C in Calc 1, why are you going to Calc 2? Like, why is the college letting you go to Calc 2? Like, sure, maybe you can make up the difference in that time, and but it just seems like you're going to have a harder time. I think there was, it's Sal Khan who has a quote. I don't remember. I'm going to misquote it, but basically it's like if you're building the foundation to a house, oh, you built the foundation, you got a 70%. It's a C, it passes. All right, let's start building the walls now. Well, you're,
Mhm.
you're building on an incomplete or faulty foundation, and that is not effective. So, in that sense, there is an importance to having the knowledge, having the skills before going on to the next level, right? And I think that having that knowledge and skills is more important than, like, the grade is important. Having those knowledge and skills is important, but the way that it's structured around that, the way that the schools structure it, is not ideal, right? And there's this, what's the right word? There's this idea, I can't remember the exact term for it, but basically, where the focus of education is on acquiring the skill and not acquiring the grade. So you keep on learning until you've acquired that skill, gotten that acceptable level, whether it be 95 or 100 or whatever. Then you can
Mhm.
move on. And instead of, because everybody learns at different rates, right? Some people will learn math. Like I did those 2 years of math in 1 year because I was just ready for it. My brain was ready for it, and I was interested in it. Some people will take 2 years to do 1 year's worth of math because their brain works slower for that specific subject, and their brain might work faster for literature, right? So everybody has their own physical needs and capabilities when it comes to learning specific subjects. And if schools took advantage of that, then maybe they could be like, okay, we're not teaching you in a semester all of you the same things in the same time. If we allow there to be flexibility in that ending, then that would be much more useful to actually learning the things. Now that's if actually learning the things is the important and not importance and not the grade itself. Um,
Mhm.
but
Absolutely,
mhm.
I totally agree with you, especially with the idea that um, that the learning is the important part, not the grade. The grade should not be this thing you focus on, you
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
And it while you were talking about how colleges could take advantage of that and like spread out the learning time so people had an easier time, um, it made me think like that is a great opportunity for community colleges
Mhm.
who are often taking in freshman students and giving them a foundation, and they usually move on to another college from there.
Mhm.
That would be a fantastic use case of this idea where they could have a now this might get a little cramped, but just to throw out an idea, you would have one calc 1 class that takes a semester. You'd have another that spans 2 semesters, and so you could go and pick what you felt comfortable doing, and professors would actually be able to have the time to teach everyone
At the
what they
different
need.
rate, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, another what comes to mind here is that there given exactly what I described, there would likely be some like talk about, oh man, you went to the 2 semester Calc 1 class, or you went to the one. Whoa,
Mhm.
you know, that's really just knowing that that would probably happen is really kind of sad.
Yeah.
Um, and I think we have to work on the cultural problem
Yeah.
of learning rates are different,
Yeah. Definitely.
and people can be smart at their own. People can just be super smart socially. They might be terrible academically, relatively,
Sure.
but they could be incredibly smart socially, and that really matters. And there's a I forget the word, but there's a preconception that people who get through college and academia faster are smarter than other people, but you know that's
Yeah.
a problem in and of itself.
Yeah. It's
Probably
just
for a different
accepting
day.
differences. But this made me think. It's like I mentioned, I did those 2 years of math in 1 year. I also did my literature spilled out into the summer because I couldn't finish it in that time. So there's that trade-off there in my life too. And that was also one of the benefits and things I loved about homeschooling was that there was that flexibility. It
Mm.
allowed me to learn faster when I needed it, and it allowed me to learn slower when I needed it.
And that's my kind of idea of community colleges spreading these things out, is that when you're teaching the foundation of something, when you need to have a thorough, strong foundation for a subject, it's very beneficial to have a flexible schedule so that you can fit in those subjects where you're not as strong in them or you're not as interested, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing. If community colleges could take care of the foundation a little, something in that manner, other colleges would take in students that have a stronger foundation and are more capable of handling a single condensed semester
Yeah.
of learning.
Yeah. This is true.
Well, that was fascinating.
That was fascinating.
That was very fascinating. All right, good talk. Good talk.
Good real
That
talk.
sounds
Uppercase
very
R.
Good uppercase real talk. Real talk. I wish we had. We need some motion graphics.
Yeah.
That'd be great. No
If
BS.
somebody wants to, someone wants to make it for us, that would be way better. No.
Fantastic.
All right.
Our next segment is the late night sock talk, and if you'll excuse us, we do have to take a moment to don our ritualistic traditional sock garb. So give us just a moment.
This is true.
Very good. And as soon as we don our ritualistic sock garb, we do have to perform the chant in order that we do not become petrified wood. So let us perform that chant very quickly. Okay, very good. So yeah, we wanted to discuss a very, very important topic to us and the next generation and the generation after that, potentially even extraterrestrial life. But Kristian, what is that topic? Can you introduce it?
We need to talk about what kind of shadow puppets are theoretically possible to make with your hands.
These things.
These things. These articulators. Gesticulators.
You know when you turn off one light and you project your shadows onto a surface and you create a little bunny? Like that?
There's one.
That's not a bunny. That's a bunny.
There you go.
More or less. That's a shadow puppet. I just wanted to let everyone know who didn't know what a shadow puppet was.
We need to make sure they're educated. Unfortunately, I don't have a projection surface to be able to do that, but
that's quite all right.
We're talking about theory here, right?
We're talking about theory. This is not about what you can do with your hands. Other people might have different hands.
This is right.
Let's
point
that out.
Everyone does have different hands.
You know what? That's true, and that's something I actually want to talk about. So, real quick, can you describe your hands to me? How are they different from my hands?
Well, you see, my hands have 5 fingers, and your hands also have 5 fingers.
This is true.
They don't have the same fingerprints or the same markings, right? Like, you'll see, that's why palm readers are really good at this kind of crazy stuff, because they'll just, like, see the markings. And that's how they're different. They're also different in that the DNA is different. If you think about it, right? Like, they generate similar visual structures, but, I mean, you don't know what goes on behind the scenes here. Our hands are very different.
And what's interesting is that because our DNA is actually different, what goes on underneath the surface of the skin is entirely different for every human being. So mine, as far as I know, I am of the subtype that has bones. Kristian, on the other hand, does not actually have bones. It's a different material. It's a different mechanism behind how his fingers move.
Right. I have nobes. And the nobes, I don't know, I think they bend a bit differently, and they might allow, like, light to come through them. Like, you can kind of see that, how it's shimmering through.
Yeah, the tips of your nodules, perhaps?
Yes, exactly. So, I mean, we could talk about the 42 different classes of hands and the substances that are involved in those subtypes. But we could also, like, talk about how the shadows actually are affected.
Wait, hold on. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, but your screen is flashing red. That's not the emergency sock alarm, is it?
No, it's not the. That was the alert alarm.
It's still going.
It's still going. The emergency alarm is actually yellow. The
Oh, okay.
right, right, because today's the ritualistic day,
Right.
not the traditional day, right? So
Okay.
it's kind of a combined thing. So it's red just means like, hey, pay attention.
Right.
Yellow is emergency.
Okay. Okay. We're good. Sorry.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry for interrupting you. Please
it's okay.
continue. I just didn't want another event.
But that brings us to the next point, which the color of the light will change the color of your skin and the color of the shadows that are produced.
This is
Um,
true. And in some cases, the shape of the shadow, mind you.
Yes, the shape of the light will change the shape of the shadow. We all know that this is scientifically proven that triangle light sources will produce triangle shadows. We don't know
This is
how to
true.
describe the fact that spherical light surfaces produce hand-shaped shadows, but the triangle ones produce triangle shadows. You should try that at home to figure out why the shape changes.
A triangular shaped light source will create some very fascinating things. Do not use a spiral shaped light source.
Right.
I'm just PSA, don't do it. I physically cannot describe what happens, but I would not suggest it to anyone.
That's right.
Um, but quickly moving on. So theory.
Yes, theory.
What is theoretically possible? Now, there are actually some mathematical equations that can help
Absolutely.
describe some subtypes of hand shadows. And a lot of it, gets into really complex Lorentz transformations and calculus and double integrals and all this stuff. We don't need to get into that right now, but I just want to get your take on this. Um, can we perform a planet-wide shadow puppet? Can we
Right.
create that?
With only people's hands.
Preferably only with people's hands. I'm not sure if the summoning ritual would actually take place if we were to use a bionic hand or anything
Right.
like that. So people's hands, yes.
People's hands. I think the theory tells us that it's definitely possible. If the moon is on the same side as the sun, then that takes up a portion of the projection surface that your hands need to cover. There aren't enough hands to cover the surface of the earth. So, unless you want to dig up a bunch of dead bodies and use their hands, you're going to have to get closer to the light source. So, what we're thinking is we take everybody on the planet Earth, move them a couple 100,000 miles closer to the sun, put their hands out, and it will generate a large enough shadow that the Earth will be covered. Again, from that side with the help of the moon, but otherwise, we're going to need to start making some more babies, otherwise, it's not going to happen.
That's true. And we've estimated we'll need about 14 trillion human beings. And given the rate that the worldwide population is increasing, this is certainly possible. But not sure how long we'll survive with that many people. So we do want to do it before we get to the point of overpopulation.
Right.
Yeah,
Now,
because we would like to survive the event that
we
follows
would like
a
to
worldwide
survive.
shadow puppet.
And the more the merrier to do that. And that's the largest hand puppet, right?
Right.
But if we want to talk about numbers, right? If you just take a single hand, you've got two of them, so that doubles the number. You've got
Right.
10 fingers, so that's a multiple by 10, so that's 20 different possibilities there. Each of these fingers has a couple joints, so that's 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 joints per finger. Multiply that by 9, we're already at like 180 different possibilities. But the range of motion, 109, I think there's like we probably say 90 degrees of motion per joint. So
Mm-hmm.
multiply by another 90. Are you calculating this
I
right
am
now?
calculating this right now.
Multiply by another 90. And then I think we have motion that goes in this direction, right? Laterally.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think that's about 45 degrees per, so multiply by
About
45.
45. So 45.
And then this isn't counting the different shapes like compressions that you can make with your hands. So I
This
just
is
say
true.
multiply by another like 50 or something, and that should get you somewhere close enough. But that's with two hands separately. There are about
Mm.
40 billion ways that you can combine your hands together,
Mm.
but we're going to ignore those for now. So just what do
Well,
we
and
get?
I just want to point out that that's an exponential function. Like
Right.
we're already at 3.6 million,
Yeah.
or sorry, no, 36 million
Yeah.
possible combinations. It's exponential. We don't need to get into that theory.
In fact, we might be able to argue that there are an infinite number of combinations. You just have to count um, the number of molecules and atoms used in your hand,
Hmm.
and then just take every shift in three-dimensional space with a single light point. That's another thing. We didn't even factor in the number of light sources that you have.
That's true. That's a great point, actually. There was a recent paper that came out that described how multiple light sources can create potentially living shadow puppets. Using the right setup of light sources, you can actually create something that is alive. Now, they haven't existed for long enough. It's kind of like a black hole. It's an unstable reaction
Hmm, hmm.
to check if they're sentient or not. But this is an active source. This is an active field of study.
Yeah,
This is serious.
I think the first kind of life that they experimented with was something pretty simple, like Conway's Game of Life. They were just able to simulate that entirely with light and shadows, which is a feat of its own.
It is. That was a lot of light sources. And this was back when they only had incandescent bulbs, by the
Right,
way, not
right.
even LEDs.
Yeah.
So that whole operation cost them about $2 million, taking into account inflation.
Right.
And so we're talking about life now, life and death, in fact.
Hmm.
These shadow puppets could hold the key to, we can't be sure at this point, but like immortality. Like that's what they're talking about under the table. They don't put that in the papers,
Mm.
but this is a possibility given what we've seen. And so we're talking about what's theoretically possible
Mhm.
with shadow puppets. And is that the kind of shadow puppets that are possible, or what we can accomplish with them? That is the next question I want to come to. What do you think are the limits that humankind could reach using sock puppet technology?
You said sock puppet, and I was just going to go off on that because I think shadow
Oh,
puppets
I'm
are
sorry.
the
Oh,
old
I keep
technology.
misspeaking.
You're gonna spoil the next kind of century of research. I think that sock puppet are going to be much more lucrative than shadow puppets because you can just like if you create a sock, it has infinite manipulation ability compared to fingers where there's like static movement, right? There's like rigid motion. Socks have infinite motion. We're going to be going into a new industry. We're going to take sock puppets to the next level. Forget about shadow puppets. They are old school. We're going to be able to create the same things that shadow puppets used with fewer socks.
Oh my gosh, this is like when we bypass Moore's law. This is moving beyond subatomic particles. This is everything.
Exactly.
We don't even. We're talking about life right now. Listen, if our hand puppets, if our shadow puppets are alive, think about what our sock puppets could be
I know.
beyond our wildest dreams. So when we talk about hand puppets, sock puppets, shadow puppets, we're talking about the limits of humankind itself and the limits of our capabilities. We've come so far in our pursuit of knowledge, in our pursuit of power. We've created huge industries, we've created huge countries with enormous capabilities, and now we're just tapping the surface of the next industrial revolution, the next quantum revolution, the next space age. Get excited, people.
Get excited. Puppets are the history.
Puppets are going to fill every history book in existence. We're going to get about maybe a chapter dedicated to everything leading up to puppets. It's all puppets from here on out.
It's all puppets from here on out. You even said it in our pilot episode. We are being puppeted by the socks.
You shouldn't have said.
Uh-oh.
Okay, we'll edit that.
Okay.
So moving on to our next topic, which our next segment, which is What's
What
your
is
world?
your world?
I'm excited. Did you ask me last time?
I did ask you
Oh,
first.
I'm sorry. Let's pay our respects
Oh, yes.
and remove our ritualistic traditional sock garb.
Ba-da-ba-dum.
Sin Taos se la fara la sidao. Excellent. So, what's your world? Now, did you ask me first this last time?
I did ask you first last time.
I would like to ask you, Kristian.
Wonderful.
What's your world?
Well, my world, I actually had one pre-thought to this, but the rest will not. And my world doesn't exist in time. There is no time in my world.
Oh,
It is a static universe that doesn't have any motion or time. However, it does have a state. So the state propagates throughout the space, right? Because we're talking about a three-dimensional space here. But there is no progression or movement in time. There is a state, and there can be on and off um, actuations in this state. Kind of like light bulbs, right? Like think about like an array of light bulbs in the universe that are flashing. They're actually not flashing. They're either on or off. But what gives outside viewers of this universe an idea of time is that they can never observe the same spot of the universe at the same time or at any
oh,
given time. You can only observe one portion of the universe at a single instance of time, and then it changes when you observe it again. So it gives you the illusion of time because when you look back, you see a different part of the universe. And people of our universe and similar universes are actually able to create like a window into this other universe that is timeless. And that's how they're able to observe it. And in that window, they're seeing these lights, these red and green lights that are either off or on, and they'll look at it and they will see it there. And they'll look away, and when they look back, it's different. And they created technologies that will like flash a camera and turn it off and on so they can get like image feed of it. And every time they get the image, it's different. They're trying to find any sort of patterns in this universe, right? Because this is one of the first universes that my sub universe has found.
mhm.
Um, so yeah, the world is a timeless world that is observable once in every location.
Fascinating. An interesting place to study. Perhaps we'll have to visit sometime.
Maybe we can.
It's cool.
You won't remember what you saw. I mean, maybe you will. You won't find what you saw previously.
Yeah, you'll never find it again. Now that's a fascinating concept.
Lonely
The
or
one
special.
the one thing the thing you see, you'll never see again.
And nobody else will ever see.
When you take a picture of it, that image you see, they've proven that it may not be the same every time you look at the same
Ooh,
image. It's like
that
it rewrites history.
Oh, that because it's taking photons from that universe, the photons transmit the state of the universe.
Mm. It's just like quantum entanglement.
Yep.
Beautiful.
Entangles particles, like matter particles to light particles.
Whoa.
There you go. So that's my world.
I love it.
What is your world?
Well, my world is a it's like it's fractals. It's
Hmm.
all fractals, but of ordinary objects you would see in our world.
Okay.
So, looking into this world, or really from an entity living in this world, there is no direction. Direction does not actually exist. What exists are concepts that have a space that they float around in. But within this space is not, you can't actually point in a direction.
Mm.
It's just objects that exist with a location.
Do the beings
Yep.
exist with one location? Are there beings in this world?
There are beings. Um, Again, it's hard to describe what they look like,
Hmm.
as everything is fractally and infinitely folds in on itself. So, say you're looking into the distance at an unknown location, and in the distance you see two palm trees floating towards each other, into each other. Everything in your field of view is constantly moving, and when they touch, what happens is that spot where these two objects touch actually explodes like dropping a pebble into a pond, and like
Mm.
ripples out a brand new object. And in some cases they discovered that it ripples out a brand new universe with brand new possibilities and physical properties.
Wow.
But it always matches the same fractally sort of movement pattern. It's just that, in this direction there may be rotational movement. In the original universe that I'm talking about, there is no rotational movement either. There is location, but no direction. What I mean by no direction is that you look in this direction, right? And, it feels like you're looking this direction. You look over here, you look back, it's something completely different. It's completely untraceable, your rotational movement. And so when you walk through this world, you need to be careful not to touch anything. Lest you do, you will be frozen in place for an entire eternity. And you will experience every microsecond of it. And out of your body and mass, connected with this other object, is a new object that just flows into existence, into reality. Or, if you're lucky, it'll be a new universe. That universe will actually take your matter into itself. So sometimes people get lucky and don't just get trapped for an eternity. But oftentimes they do.
So the people typically float around, and then if they...
So they're actually capable of movement, but the physical properties of the world are not the same. So there's no walking around because there's no floor. You can't step on anything. So what they do is they move with sound.
Oh.
They call out in a direction, and these ripples are actually visible in a cone stretching out in front of them. And because of the way just the fabric of reality works, it creates this pull that draws them in the direction that they sing or hum. And depending on how you sing, how you hum, how you speak, will dictate potentially your direction based on where you're pointing, or your speed. And in some cases, some beings can actually teleport. So say one of these beings who can teleport bumps into a post office box, a blue mailbox, and they knock their heads on it, and a new reality starts to appear. They can actually, if they sing properly, teleport out of that and into another location. These beings are also capable of teleporting into the other universes created by the ripples of matter colliding.
Is our universe one of those ripples?
Absolutely.
Oh, wow.
So everything you see in our world, the monitor you're looking at, the people you're seeing, we actually exist as matter in that upper swirly fractal universe. And that's why there are mailboxes there. That's why there are palm trees there. It's because it's not copying from our universe. We're copying from that universe. When these things collide, and as more things can collide into these new universes, it actually adds to the total sum of this universe. We are living through an eternal momentary existence of one of these ripples in this fractal universe.
There you have it.
And that's my world.
That's a world, all right. All right.
All right. That was fun.
That was fun. Thank you for coming to the podcast with a K, the first episode. We will see you next time.
Sounds fun. See you guys.